Hello, this is Mrs. Wilhelm, and I'm going to share a story with you that comes from a very old book. This book I had when I was a little girl. So the story's been around for a really long time. The story is about a little girl named Little Red Riding Hood. So I'm going to show you there are so many books that have been written about Little Red Riding Hood. There's a funny version of Little Red Riding Hood. There's one where they change it up and they have her, instead of walking, she's riding a bicycle. There's one, instead of it taking place just in the regular springtime, it's out here in the snow. And there's also a Chinese version of Little Red Riding Hood, Long Popo. It says a Red Riding Hood story from China. This one's really good. It's even won awards. And maybe we'll look at that one another time. But for now, I'm going to share with you, this is the traditional story of Little Red Riding Hood. But since there's so many various versions, a writer can take a story and put his own writing style into it. So the writer is Sam McBratney. So you can do that too with your stories. You can find a familiar story and change it up a little bit. And the same with the illustrator. She put her own style on, Emma McChester Clark. So this is the story that I'm going to be reading of Little Red Riding Hood. When I'm done reading it, I'm going to ask that you retell the story to your family or maybe your little sister or big brother. And so you could just straight out retell the story, or you could make a copy of the picture that you find on the internet, like I did. I took my book and made a copy from the printer, and I can retell the story using something like this. You could look around your house. Maybe you have some dolls that you could use, or some kind of, even stuffed animals could probably work. I found this doll and I put like a Red Riding Hood on her. You could use this for like the mother. And remember the handwriting guy in our classroom? He can be the character of the woodcutter. In our story, he could be that. Maybe you could go for a real puppet. And I have this puppet of a wolf. And so that would be perfect to use for the wolf in this story. And then this is a really clever puppet someone once gave me. This is Little Red Riding Hood. You see her there. And then if you turn her upside down and move her skirt down, she becomes the grandmother character. And then I don't want to give the story away, but there's a part when you're going to see the wolf dressed as the grandmother. So puppets are fun too, but you could just retell the story. So listen very carefully to this story that I'm going to read for you now of Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who loved to wear a red cape that her grandmother made for her. People were so used to seeing her in that red cape that wherever she went, they called her Little Red Riding Hood. Now, 2 or 3 times each week, Little Red Riding Hood and her mother would go to visit their grandmother. They would stay on the main path, and they walked quickly through the forest, the woods, especially when it got dark. Grandmother lived all by herself. And like most grandmothers, she was so pleased to see Little Red Riding Hood. She enjoyed the food that they brought, but most of all, she liked to see and hug Little Red Riding Hood. One day, Little Red Riding Hood's mother was too busy for them to go visit Grandma. "I could go myself," said Little Red Riding Hood. "Grandma will wonder why we didn't come over." Now listen to what her mom asked her to do. "Will you promise to walk quickly through the woods without stopping?" said her mother. "Yes," said Little Red Riding Hood. "And will you promise to stay on the main path?" "Oh, indeed I will," promised Little Red Riding Hood. So Little Red Riding Hood set off for Grandma's house with the basket of food. On her way, she did not stop to listen to the birds. She didn't stop to watch the squirrels as they were playing. Suddenly, in the middle of the woods, the birds were no longer singing, and the squirrels were all gone. Little Red Riding Hood wondered, why were the woods so quiet? Then she noticed someone was watching her from the bush. It was, but you know what it is, it was a wolf. No one ever had told Little Red Riding Hood that a little girl all on her own would not be safe around a hungry wolf. And so she was not afraid when the wolf said, "Hello." She replied back to the wolf, "Hello." And she said, "I am not allowed to stop. My mother said I must walk quickly through the woods." That's good. She's doing what her mother asked. But then the wolf said, "I shall walk quickly too." He smiled at her and he asked her what was in the basket. "Oh, it's bread and honey for my grandmother. She lives all alone, and we bring her things to eat," said Little Red Riding Hood. The wolf asked, "Would you like me to show you some things that all grandmothers love?" "It's over there, off the path." What do you think? Should Little Red Riding Hood be following the wolf off the path among the trees? Little Red Riding Hood did not want to leave the path, but it was wonderful, the idea of having a surprise to give to Grandma. And so she followed the wolf. Oh no. And she went to where the bluebell flowers are growing. "Oh, those are lovely flowers," cried Little Red Riding Hood. "Why don't you pick some for your grandmother?" suggested the wolf. I don't know that she's doing the right thing. The wolf watched Little Red Riding Hood, and he thought this would be a good place to eat a little girl. But then he had a better idea. He could have 2 meals instead of 1. I wonder what the wolf means by that. 2 meals instead of 1. Do you know the answer? Let's read on to find out more. The wolf said, "If you tell me where your grandmother lives, then I could visit her too." So Little Red Riding Hood, who thought she had nothing to fear from the wolf, told the wolf where her grandmother's cottage was. And the wolf ran. Sorry, I turned the page the wrong way. And the wolf ran quickly off. Oh, that was right. When Little Red Riding Hood came to her grandmother's house, she knocked at the door. "I'm in my bed, dear," said a hoarse voice. "Come on in." Little Red Riding Hood thought that Grandma must have a sore throat, for that didn't sound like her usual voice. And when she got inside the room, the curtains were pulled and it was very dark. "It's very dark in your house today, Grandma," said Little Red Riding Hood. "Oh, I'm not well. Come over here where I can see you," whispered the hoarse voice. What do you think? Is Grandma really sick? Little Red Riding Hood wanted to show Grandma the flowers to cheer her up. "I have a surprise for you, Grandma," said Little Red Riding Hood. "Get up onto the bed, my dear. whispered the hoarse voice. What are you thinking now? Little Red Riding Hood came closer, but she thought that did not really look like Grandma. She must be really sick, she thought. And Little Red Riding Hood said to Grandma, "My Grandma, what big ears you've got! All the better to hear you with, my dear." "My Grandma, what big eyes you've got! All the better to see you with, my dear." "And Grandma, what big teeth you've got!" What's going to happen next? Can you think? Do you know? "All the better to eat you with," cried the wolf. And without taking one bite, he swallowed her up whole. Just then, outside a cottage, a woodcutter heard a lot of noise inside the cottage, and he wondered if the old woman who lived there was all right. Rushing in, the woodcutter noticed a wolf with a full belly was in Grandma's bed. And with one blow of his axe, the wolf was struck by the woodcutter, and he was dead. The woodcutter had some handy tools, and he used some scissors to open up the wolf, and inside out popped a very surprised Little Red Riding Hood. And she asked, "Where is my grandmother?" They looked into the closet, and there was the old woman. She was just fine. The wolf had tied her up when he heard Little Red Riding Hood coming. All is safe and well now. And from this point on, when Little Red Riding Hood would go walking, she never stopped to pick flowers as she hurried through the woods. She wouldn't talk to anyone, and she always kept to the main path where it was bright and open. And that is the end, the story of Little Red Riding Hood. So now your job, now that you're done hearing the story, is to start from the beginning, retell what you remember about the story. Whoever you're retelling it to, they can help you with that too. And like I said, if you want to do it with like a little puppet, you could do that. If you just want to use some doll that you dress up, you could do that. And if you happen to have a stuffed animal or a puppet, you could add that in your story retelling too. And just like we do in the classroom, I would like you to also think about what was your favorite part of the story. Name that favorite part, but please explain your favorite part of the story. The favorite part of the story was because, and then you want to tell more about that. All right, my friends, it was really nice to be able to share one of my favorite stories with you. And maybe we'll do some more other versions of Little Red Riding Hood the next time we get together. All right, have a great day. Bye-bye.